Very well, I'll call this meeting to order. Please be advised that today's meeting is available for the public to attend virtually and is being streamed and recorded. Can I get a motion, please, to adopt the agenda? Moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Today we have Mr. Doug Blackie, Regional Health Advocate, for a progress update. Mr. Blackie, welcome.
Thanks, Mayor Foster. Hello, Council and staff in Fort Nelson. I'm happy to provide the Regional Health Advocate update to Regional Council today. We have provided a written report, which hopefully was circulated to you late last week. I'll just hit maybe some of the highlights of that and then open to any questions or feedback or suggestions that you have. So at our last get-together back on July 5th, you provided some feedback on the Regional Health Advocacy Strategy document, and that feedback has been incorporated, as well as feedback from our sort of small group that we've been working with of municipal staff, as well as Northern Health, just to get it polished up into a place where we're able to table it for sort of final approval with Regional Council, and then hopefully a more public release. We also have a draft news release that's also been put together that hopefully we can, or the Northern Rockies can do some public sharing of the document and get some conversation going into the community. Speaking of the community, we are proposing a forum in mid-September, and just working with Jaylene on some of the logistics around that. But the idea is to bring together a slightly wider group of community decision makers, including local business and industry, as well as political and healthcare and social service leads, and a lot of the people we talked to back in April and May as well. And really to review the health advocacy strategy, the 3 priorities that have been proposed, as well as working with them to see how they can commit as business and industry and sector leaders to help amplify the key messages and the priorities of the Northern Rockies in their networks. And this is this idea of creating a network of advocates. And so want to start at the community level and bring folks together probably for a half day. And right now we're looking around mid-September for, we're all hoping, an in-person forum or workshop with some key folks around that. And we found in the past, certainly in my practice, that it's great to bring people together and talk about what you want to do, but a big piece of this workshop would be around gaining commitment from those organizations and individuals about what they can do within their, as I said, within their networks and within their work and their work with government and higher levels of government, as well as their industry, to help, as I said, amplify the message of the Northern Rockies. So that's coming along, and hopefully we'll be able to have some further updates for you shortly on that. I did have the opportunity as well on July 5th and I'm not sure I reported this back because the timing was about the same when I met with Regional Council last, but I was able to have about an hour with Kathy Ulrich, the CEO of Northern Health, as well as Angela DeSmit, who's, as you know, the Chief Operating Officer for the Northeast region. We covered a lot of different topics. I think Kathy is very curious and very interested in the work that's being done, which is good, because I really wanted to relay to her that the strategy and the approach that the Northern Rockies is taking is more around, creating and strengthening those partnerships with Northern Health and trying to work together toward those shared goals. We talked a little bit about some of the population dynamics of what that may mean in terms of health service provision, some of the human resource struggles that Northern Health is having in the Northeast, notwithstanding a number of recent hires, which was really good news that Annette Wager shared last week at the hospital, but nonetheless, ongoing challenges to attract and keep people in the Northern Rockies and in the North in general. We also talked a little bit about some options to try and support and strengthen primary care in the Northern Rockies in terms of physician recruitment retention, but also looking at potentially down the road different models of physician compensation and structure of primary care, looking toward this idea of primary care networks and some of the new initiatives that are being rolled out provincially. So I think it was a very positive meeting that way with Ms. Ulrich and Ms. DeSmit. I think, you know, I've worked with with Kathy in the past, and it was good just to kind of reacquaint there with this newer role that I have with you, and to start and continue to build that relationship as well. So I think there's some good traction going forward, certainly that I can help with, but also you know, Mayor Foster and Council and in your work as well, and your continuing engagement with Kathy Ulrich. Last week, I had a meeting. I had reached out actually when we were doing the consultations in April, May. One of the community stakeholders mentioned that they had been in contact with the seniors advocate, Isabel McKenzie, about a review that she was planning to do around rural health service access for seniors in British Columbia. And I thought, oh, that might be something that, you know, really nicely coincides or aligns with what we're doing. I reached out to Isabel McKenzie's office. I was able to actually have an in-person meeting, my first in-person meeting with somebody since March of last year due to COVID, but we had a nice physically distanced meeting at Nanaimo Hospital. She happened to be in Nanaimo. Again, a very wide-ranging conversation. I learned a lot about what her priorities are and what she's looking at in terms of rural BC. Because of COVID, the rural review that she's proposing has been pushed into 2022, but she did, and I did commit to continue to maintain connection with her, to share any appropriate materials, working with staff and council, obviously, with what you would like to share with the seniors advocate. She's very interested in First Nations health services for seniors, for elders in the north and in rural BC, and what she sees as a potential fragmentation of services between local First Nations, the First Nations Health Authority, and the Health Authority. So I think she's got a huge scope potentially for this review. And I think, you know, as I said, she was very curious about what the Northern Rockies is doing, the fact that you've brought on someone to help with your health advocacy work, and I think there's some good inroads there. And the third thing, and I'll try to be brief on this one, again, it was more out of curiosity as we've been thinking about the transportation issue. As you know, patient transportation is one of the priorities. It's been identified, and, you know, trying to think outside the box a little bit. And there is increasingly, as many of you know, car sharing has become a thing across, well, pretty much around the world. This idea that, you know, whatever you want to call it, crowdsourcing or car sharing. And one of them, which is a nonprofit, is called Modo. At the moment, they're in Vancouver, Victoria, Nanaimo, and Kelowna. But I reached out to them to see, one, if they were interested in ever expanding their reach into rural British Columbia. And then specifically, as I sort of laid out some of the issues that people have shared with me around the challenges of residents in the Northern Rockies having to leave town, the cost of that transport, but more the availability of transport. If people have unreliable cars or they don't have a car, how will they get to Fort St. John and those sorts of things? So notwithstanding recouping some of those services obviously back into the community, when people do have to travel, and they will inevitably have to travel, is there another card in the deck, so to speak, that perhaps car sharing could be an option? And the gentleman I spoke to, Sylvain Solaire from Modo, he told me about what the city of Kelowna did, which from a municipal government perspective was very interesting, where they divested part of their automobile fleet to a car share nonprofit in the community, which was eventually taken over by Modo. But essentially, the city of Kelowna felt that a number of their fleet vehicles were being underutilized, so they put them into this co-op so that citizens could also rent them for a fee, obviously, and that fee, you know, covered insurance and maintenance and those sorts of things. And then the city actually rented their own cars back when they needed them, and found it to be a much more cost-effective way of managing the fleet and offsetting a depreciating asset and all those sorts of things. So I was very curious about that model of where a municipal government has essentially supported the creation of a car share. And so as I said in my note, it is one potential option that can be explored. I wouldn't say it's going to be our, sort of number one burning priority on the transport file, but I think with some creativity, it could actually, in a very small way, just help the people who perhaps are unable to make their appointments when they do have to travel because they have unreliable vehicles or no vehicle. And maybe this is a cost-effective way, and potentially something that maybe the municipality and local business could get behind. But like I said, right now it's just an idea, and it's an idea that Moto is certainly interested. They're not thinking of expanding their fleet into rural British Columbia, but they do have other ways that they feel that they could lend their expertise to help get something set up. So, these are those like sort of opportunities that arise and just, exploration of different ideas. Those are kind of the things that have been keeping us busy over the last month, mostly the report and just, the getting that to a point where I think, everyone's happy with it. And so hopefully that'll come fairly soon. But that's really all I had to share, other than, if the moons and everything align, I should be able to visit there in mid-September. And we're trying to align a few of the monthly meetings. There's certainly this meeting is already planned for that time, as well as the Community Health Plan Steering Committee has agreed to move its meeting down a little bit. So that'll be kind of I think a very fruitful visit if we can also align the community forum into that as well. So that's kind of where things are at. Absolutely open to any questions or comments or ideas and suggestions that people have. Bye.
So, Mr. Blackie, I think that's very interesting, and the ride sharing thing. My son works for a ride sharing company in California, Turo, which is a nationwide car sharing service, and so it's rather interesting you mentioned this, because some people have brought up, and I've thought often about the idea of having a vehicle that can go back and forth to Fort St. John. That is maybe owned by a nonprofit, and the gas can be paid for it. And whether that's a solution or not, I'm really not sure, but it is something that's worth exploring anyway. I'm glad you had a good conversation with Miss Ulrich. I think the conversation with Miss Ulrich are always good, but I think we have to recognize she doesn't have a magic wand and she can't do all things for all people. But it is good that they're receptive and they're open to working together to improve healthcare in the Northern Rockies. And I think, it's good having those relationships that Northern Rockies and Northern Health can go together on to help citizens that need the services. So it's, promising that you reached out to them and had those conversations. And maybe we'll look forward to more concrete developments as that moves forward. Were there any other comments from Mr. Blackie? Councillor Goring?
Hi. Yeah, I'm sorry I missed the beginning of the meeting because I couldn't find a place to pull over. But can you speak a little bit about the point that you make when you met with Kathy Ulrich around topics included balancing core health services with population changes in the Northern Rockies? Can you give me any more insight into what did that conversation sound like?
I think, in my estimation anyway, Councillor Gruing, I think that the conversation sounded positive. So I think I want to, if I can go out on a branch and say that, because I think the balancing act is Northern Health does have a framework that it uses to determine sort of what the core services should be in a rural community based on a whole number of different factors, population being one of them. And one of the challenges, I think, this is where I think the Northern Rockies has because of its geographic location, it gets extra points, so to speak. I don't think it used points, but it gets some extra points because it is isolated from, 4 hours from Fort St. John, 9 hours from Prince George, that even though the population has gone down over the last few years, the services have maintained relatively the same level. And the challenge, of course, normally as populations go down, so do services, because demand for those services theoretically also go down. But there's other factors involved, and that's where the conversation is. And I think there was some acceptance that there are those other factors, which is the need for a 24/7 ER because of industry activity, because of tourism travel, because of, you know, the Alaska Highway, but also that while the population is going down, what are the needs in that population and what are the alternatives? And I think that's the key point, is that, you know, if you're in Vanderhoof and you need a CT, it's an hour. But if you're in Fort Nelson and you need a CT, it's 4 hours. And that factors into things, right? And if you're having an acute event, a life-threatening event, you know, it's a lot more difficult to get out of Fort Nelson to a higher level of care than it is in Vanderhoof or even a Mackenzie or a Terrace. So I think that's what we're, you know, the conversation is that there's an acknowledgement that, you know, from where it was to where it is now, because of economics, the population has gone down a little bit. You know, will the services necessarily drop? Well, that's an open conversation, but I think the advocacy piece here is to say, look, there are other factors in the Northern Rockies that would support at least sustaining the current services and not losing any more just because the population has changed. And I think the other piece too is who is living in the community now. And there was a graph that I was able to put into the document, which I'm sure you've seen, is that there's potentially an increase in an older population, which brings its own unique healthcare demands, you know, more demands on the healthcare system as the population ages. So again, I think there's lots of arguments that say, yeah, you know what, we agree, maybe the population has gone down a little bit. However, there's more evidence on this side that we need to maintain and strengthen health services. And I think that was the conversation. And I think to her defense, Kathy Albrecht and Angela DeSmit recognized that, you know, if you were just to look at population and say, yeah, you know, like there's, you know, we should reduce services because demand is going down. And it's like, well, wait a minute, you know, can we make an argument? And I think they were open to that the Northern Rockies is unique in that manner in terms of its geography and in terms of its population. So I think that's really all it was about, was acknowledging that just a strict application of a population-based model on services isn't going to fly. And I think that's the role that, you know, again, you and Mayor Foster and others need to continue to advocate for, because I don't think Northern Health is going to do that, but I think it's being aware that that framework is population-based. And so if the population continues to go down, there may be some difficult decisions that have to be made. And that's where, you know, the advocacy comes in. But I think there's enough to counterbalance it.
So I just want to get on the record then 2 points. That just because there's a population decrease does not mean that there is a decrease for services, right? Like, yeah, so that is a very important point, especially in today's world, right? We still have 5 doctors here. So our population is less, yes, but that doesn't mean that people are accessing the healthcare system less. So I think we really need to keep that in the forefront when we're talking to officials from Northern Health. Is population decrease does not necessarily mean that there's less people or less services being needed. And then my second point that I would like to get on the record is that I think it's imperative that we as a community somehow, something are tracking the level of service, because yeah, they do have this plan, that with this service plan, and it, you know, it says, let's just say it says that ultrasound services are to be available, or lab services, or whatever it happens to be. But I don't know that anybody is tracking all the disruption of services that we have been experiencing over at least the last 12 years. And so I think that's really, really important that we somehow put a mechanism in place to track these disruptions in services. Yeah. And those are my 2 points. Thanks.
No, thank you, Councillor Gruen. Excellent points.
Any other comments, councillors? Mr. Barry, Ms. McIver? Don't tell me we're going to give you back a half an hour of your day.
Okay, I got a meeting at 1, so I can have my lunch.
You'll have time for a sandwich and
Yeah.
Cup of tea. Very well. If there's nothing else, then, councillors, I will move that we adjourn the meeting. Very well. Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Blackie, for this.
Yeah, Mayor Foster and Council, it's always a pleasure. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or concerns. And we'll be in touch with Scott and Jaylene coming up, and hopefully see you in person in a month.
You bet.
Have a great day.
Councillor Roper, how's everything going in Prince Rupert? Well, we've got you on the line.
Good, living the dream, Mayor Foster.
It's nice. You got
Really
lots of
great
windows
community
there.
here. Lots of windows, my new office. Really great community here. It really reminds me a lot of Fort Nelson and the people there. So I'm very at home and getting along really good. It's good to see you guys.
Good to see you